Hi, Dad. Bye, Dad. Hey guys, and welcome to another Rain Rant. I'm Archer9234. Today I'll be discussing episode 23 from Power Rangers Mystic Force, the second part of Heir Apparent. Now, just like the first part, this episode is adapting episodes 33 and 34, the two-parter from Magirangers. Just like the first part, the second part actually does follow the same story plot points that the Magiranger episodes do, and kept most of the same story. So the episode starts off right back where we left off. We basically see that everyone is totally shocked that Leanbow is Korag, and of course Udana is the one who's mostly shocked. Now I do like to point out that there was a little bit of a writing mistake. Udana clearly says that Leanbow had closed the doors, but really Claire's mother really did it. So while this semi-reunion, Imperius, Necroli, and of course all the monsters around them are like, oh great, Leanbow broke the spell, and of course she's still going to try to kill everyone. Luckily enough, Leanbow still has his magic powers and simply teleports everyone away. Fortunately enough, saving also the Mystic Force Ranger powers being fully drained from the Master. After Leanbow finally teleports everyone out of the underworld, we find that he teleported people to an alternate magic dimension, and we finally get a little break moment where he finally discusses what's going on. And we head back basically to what happened to Daggeron. We find out basically what happened was Gingy actually saved Daggeron by eating him. Now this happened exactly in the same way in the Magiranger footage. The only main difference between the Magiranger footage and the American footage is that Claire's counterpart, Lunagel, was actually with Hikaru when Smokey actually ate them. Of course, we have this little fun moment where we basically the two are trying to figure out who had the worst position. I'm not sure because Daggeron was inside Gingy's mouth, but then again, Gingy almost got blown up from Imperius' attack, and we see that Daggeron and of course Gingy are regrouping and heading toward the Rangers. While we head back where Leanbow is finally explaining what was going on. Basically, we finally get the backstory of what was happening with Leanbow during the Master fight. We see that he was successfully able to stop the Master and actually lock him away inside that hole in the ground. But unfortunately, since Leanbow was injured, the Master took advantage of the situation and basically threw all his evil magic into Leanbow, blocking out his memory and turning him into Korag. Now, there's a few things that don't really make any sense. Basically, Leanbow is explaining the whole situation right. Now, the problem is he actually remembers what was going on and what he was doing during Korag, but for some reason, Korag couldn't remember anything of Leanbow. How come Leanbow can remember what was Korag doing, but Korag can't remember what was Leanbow? Shouldn't it work both ways? In Magiranger, it makes a little bit more sense. Mainly, he didn't know what he was doing when he was Wilzard, while the Magiranger's father only remembered what happened up to that point. So after Leanbow finally finishes his story, of course all the Rangers are skeptical, of course, which makes perfectly sense. Why would you believe this? This could be a total trap, because the Rangers really don't know Leanbow except for Udana. But of course Udana believes because, again, she's his wife, she trusts him. Now Nick brings up a big question. What could you do to prove yourself? Why didn't Leanbow give back Udana's snow staff? It would make perfect sense. The first thing you did was take her snow staff. You have access to it, so why didn't you just give it back to them? Not only would it have probably helped Udana get her powers back, but it would also gave a reason for the Rangers to actually trust Leanbow. Unfortunately, Imperius, Necroli, and the Chimera monster figure out where they are and invade this dimensional world. So of course the Rangers and Leanbow are prepared to fight. Unfortunately, Udana has no magic powers anymore. Leanbow has no other choice but to send her back to Rukor. So of course the Rangers morph and start the battle of the Chimera monster, where we see that Leanbow goes into his ancient mystic mode. Unfortunately though, we see that the Master still has power and control over Leanbow. Unfortunately, shocks Leanbow and makes him totally defenseless, where Necroli grabs him and teleports him back into the underworld. While the Rangers are fighting the Chimera monster, Daggeron pops back out, and of course Imperius is totally shocked that you're supposed to be dead and stuff. And of course we finally get the introduction to Brightstar, the Phoenix Unizord in Mystic Force for the very first time. Now, originally in Magirangers, the St. Kaiser originally premiered in the Magiranger movie, which happened around 15 to 20 episodes ago. So the Magirangers did know who Unigol was, and they knew it was St. Kaiser, but of course Hikaru basically explained that this is his animal form, similar to what Catastros could do, transform into its Zord form and to an animal form. But for Mystic Force's case, we have to get a really brief explanation of where Brightstar and what it is and who he comes. It really doesn't really work that well because, again, we're being introduced to a Megazord that's only going to appear for one episode, and it came out of nowhere. Now, of course, since they're using the Japanese footage, a few things don't work in this scene. Imperius and Daggeron are going to fight one by one, But unfortunately, we see that Brightstar teleports the Rangers out of the area for really no reason. In Magiranger, originally they wanted to help Hikaru fight Imperius. But in this case, Hikaru was the one who told Unigolan to teleport them out in order to deal with the Chimera monster. So while the Rangers are teleported out of the alternate world, we basically see that Leanbow was teleported back into the underworld and right in front of the Master. And of course, the Master invokes his evil powers. And again, since he's powered up thanks to sucking up the legend powers, he basically converts Leanbow back into Korag, wiping his memory again. And Korag sets out to find the Mystic Force Rangers. At the same time, we see that Daggeron and Imperius are going to do a special one-on-one match in order to finally stop Imperius, or Imperius to stop Daggeron. For the most part, this entire fight was pretty much identical to what happened in Magiranger. The only main difference is that Lunagel, Claire's counterpart, was actually in the scene. So basically the entire fight had to be refilmed for the American version. So while Daggeron and Imperius are fighting, we see that, of course, the Chimera monster still has to be dealt with. And of course, we see that Nick is pissed off for really no reason, grabs Brightstar and transforms into the Phoenix Unizord and starts to battle out the Chimera monster. Now, this is kind of confusing, mainly because why would Nick be really this angry? Yes, obviously the Rangers would be kind of pissed off because we find out that Leanbow was once a good guy and was turned into Korag, but really, Nick really didn't know who he was at this point in time, and he didn't know him to a personal degree, so he really shouldn't be angry. The reason why this happened was because basically in the Magiranger episode, we find out that Wolzard is basically their father, the entire group's father, and of course, Kai in there resents him so much because he turned evil, betrayed them, but not also killed their mother at the same time. So while Nick is fighting in the Phoenix Unizord, of course the other Rangers join into the fight and transform into the dragon formation of the Mystic Titan. And basically they try to fight off the Chimera monster. And unfortunately the Chimera monster, since it's a combination of the Solar Streak energy powers and the dead souls that Leanbow has defeated, it's still very strong. While Nick is fighting the Chimera monster, eventually Korag interrupts the fight and basically says, I'm going to defeat you finally. But of course Nick is again pissed off and it says, I'm going to finish off the Chimera monster, then I'll deal with you. We finally get to see the Phoenix Unizord's main finisher, and we see that he defeated the monster, which I personally didn't like, because mainly, again, we saw that the Chimera monster was so powerful, but then he was just simply defeated because Nick was pissed off and he just used the Phoenix Unizord's finisher. It should have been a little bit more difficult fight. And of course, Wolzard begins his fight with the Phoenix Unizord, and those two finally duke it out. Now we head back to basically what Daggeron is doing with Imperius. For the most part, we see them both agreeing to, a fair fight and them fighting to basically the death. But the thing I don't really like is that, why does Daggeron believe Imperius? I really never liked this at all. It's like, Imperius tricked you once, almost killed you and Gingy, but then again, you still simply believe him again, that he's going to keep his word and deal with tradition and fight fairly. Now, in Magirangers, a similar thing happened to Hikaru in the story. The only difference is that since Lunagel was there, of course, she points out that this is a trap. The reason why Hikaru follows through with this is because he's keeping his word and honor to. But in the Mystic Force's case, it really doesn't make any sense why Daggeron trusts him 2 times in a row. When we head back to the Megazord fight, we basically see that Nick and Korag are basically evenly matched. Again, thanks to the Phoenix Unizord being basically identical to the Centaurus Wolf Megazord, they eventually knock each other's selves out of Zord mode and basically continue the fight on the ground. The other 4 Mystic Force Rangers are, they depowered because of the Chimera fight. But why don't they actually do anything in the episode? I never liked this where other Rangers are perfectly conscious and able to fight, and they just sit there and watch while it's going on. It doesn't really make any sense why they would do that. Now, in the Magiranger episode, at least the Rangers were actually less stupid in there. Now, they were actually trying to break up the fight between Kai and Wolzard, because again, they know he's his father, and they have to break up the fight because it's very emotional, but they don't actually do this inside the Mystic Force, which I don't understand why. They could have done something similar or attempted the fight with all 5 of each other fighting Wolzard, but they just don't do it, and it just doesn't make any sense. We head back to the Daggeron Imperius fight, and we basically see that eventually Daggeron gets the upper hand and finally strikes Imperius, since Imperius is not trustworthy, takes advantage of the situation and teleports Gingy from the sidelines right in front of him in order to stop Daggeron's finishing blow from his sword. Again, I don't understand why Daggeron trusted him, because he knew he was going to do this. It just shows Daggeron being very stupid. And of course, Gingy shouldn't have trusted Imperius either, and should have took extra precautions for being teleported into the fight. Of course, since Jinji is with Imperius now, he has the upper hand, of course, and knocks Daggeron out of his ancient mystic mode. And of course, Imperius is ready to kill Daggeron again. And of course, since Daggeron is finally honorable, he'd rather die with honor. And I'm really shocked that the writers actually said they die with honor, because normally they would always censor the word death, die, murder, etc. with the word destruction, especially later on in the episode where they actually overuse the word destroy. It's perfectly fine to say death in this case, but not in any other case. So we head back basically to Udana and Claire. Of course, since she lost her magic power, she's extremely weak and probably exhausted from going to the underworld. And of course, Claire is trying to keep her company and to keep her rested. And of course, when Claire gives her a red blanket, that of course we all remember in the beginning of Mystic Force that was Nick. Udana looks at the blanket and finally puts two and two together, where we get this final big revelation that Udana and Nick are mother and son. For the characters' moment, of course, this is a big moment for them. They didn't know that they were mother and son. But for the viewer's sake, everyone knew it. Again, just like part one, since we got spoiled with the blanket and all the little tidbits of backstory that basically explain the whole situation, people are underwhelmed. I really wish they had kept this more hidden so that the viewers would have been more surprised when we got to this moment. The same thing basically happens in Magiranger. You can pretty much figure out the whole story from the beginning of the series as well. Of course, Udana is overjoyed with happiness and simply gets out of bed, completely ignoring that she was weakened from losing her magic power, simply heads out of Root Core and heads to where the Rangers are fighting with Korag. While Udana heads toward the Rangers, we basically see that Imperius tries to do his finishing move on Daggeron. Luckily enough, Daggeron has enough energy left in him, uses his sword, breaks the lightning attack that's firing on him, and finally strikes Imperius down. And of course, we finally get the main defeat of Imperius. Since we finally defeated Daggeron, we all think it's all over and this is the end of the series. Unfortunately, Imperius gives us some bad news that there are other things waiting in the future for them. When we head back to the Mystic Force fight, we see that Udana has arrived and of course finally tells everyone that Nick is her son and that Leanbow is basically his father. Korag hears this news and eventually reverts back to Leanbow, which is kind of like too sudden and too abrupt. You would think that the master would basically make it a little bit more harder for him to transform back into Leanbow. Of course, everyone's shocked, but Nick should be the most shocked, but for some reason, it felt underperformed. You're my mother, you're my father, but then it was like, oh, okay, and then that was pretty much it. Unfortunately, after Leanbow finally reverts back to his normal self and everyone finds out the truth, the master starts breaking free thanks to the legend power boosting and heads back onto Earth. And of course, Leanbow sees that this is the only chance that they have to seal the master once again. And of course, the Rangers are going to try to help with him. But of course, since Leanbow locks everyone and can't get out their mystic morphers and keeps everyone put, fights the master on his own. Now, this is the thing I really hated about in the episode. I understand you want to protect your son and the Mystic Force Rangers from this evil, but you don't need to sacrifice yourself again. You should have had the Mystic Force Rangers help you so that you could have stayed alive and not sacrificed yourself. The same thing actually happens in Magirangers. So of course the Mystic Force Rangers stay on Earth while Leanbow of course sends the master back down to the underworld, and we see him do his special charge up move with his sword and finally take down the master once and for all. And we also see that the underworld is actually being destroyed in the same process. But of course we also see that Leanbow is going to be killed along with them. At this point in time, we don't know what happens to any of the characters. We just assume that Leanbow died with the Master. So after the Master's finally destroyed, and of course Daggeron finally defeating Imperius, everyone thinks, it's mainly over with, and of course we head back to Root Core, and we see that Nick and Daggeron are talking with each other, discussing what was going on. Since Udana knows now that Nick's her son, we get into this little fun moment where she just simply tells him to do chores. Oh great, I finally figure out who my mother is, and the first thing she does, I have to do chores. Now, overall, this episode was really good, just like the first part. Usually in Power Rangers, one episode out of two parters usually sucks, but in this case, both of them are overall good. But I have to knock a point down and give it a 3 out of 5, mainly because of the stupidity between the characters. Again, why did Daggeron simply allow Imperius to do that fight and not have precautions in place? And of course, why did the Rangers just sit on the sidelines and do nothing? At least in Magirangers, the Rangers actually attempted to stop the Kai and Wilzard fight, but in the Mystic Force Rangers, they're just sitting there watching. It's like, oh, Wilzard can just kill Nick at any point in time, or Nick can kill Leanbow, and it's like, oh, it's no big deal. Other things personally I didn't like, again, was because Leanbow sacrificed himself again just after we finally find out who he is. He goes back being evil, then turning good, and then just killing himself all over again. What do you guys personally think? Do you think the episode was like amazing because it was a good wrap up, good reveals for like Udana and Nick are mother and son, Leanbow his father? Or do you think it was stupid because again, Claire didn't do anything, the stupidness with the Rangers, and of course, you know, Leanbow sacrificing himself? Of course, leave your comments below on what you think on this episode, and of course, leave your comments below for future episodes you would like me to review. For next week's episode, I'll be doing Beware of the Night. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys right back here next week.